Chapter 1: The Fortress and the Foundation. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ashford Industries penthouse office offered a panoramic view of the city, but to Blake Ashford, the glittering lights looked like shards of broken glass. He sat behind his obsidian desk, the blue light of his monitor reflecting in eyes that felt like they had been scrubbed with sand. His head was thrumming, a rhythmic, sickening pulse behind his left temple that signaled the onset of a catastrophic migraine. "Don't let them see," he thought, his fingers gripping the edge of the mahogany desk until his knuckles turned white. "The moment you look weak, they'll tear you apart." Earlier that morning, a legal brief from his lawyers had mentioned a discharged restraining order involving Samantha. Just seeing her name on a legal header had been enough to send his nervous system into a tailspin. He could still feel the phantom sensation of her hands on his back, the sudden loss of gravity, and the sickening crunch of his shoulder hitting the marble steps 2 years ago. A soft, rhythmic knock sounded at the door. Blake didn't answer. He couldn't. The light in the room was beginning to fracture into jagged halos. The door opened anyway. Only one person had the audacity, and the permission, to ignore Blake's silence. Nathan Wyatt stepped inside, closing the door with a click that was miraculously silent. He didn't ask if Blake was okay, he didn't need to. He took one look at the CEO's rigid posture and the way his jaw was locked tight, and he immediately moved into action. "The board meeting has been pushed to tomorrow morning, sir," Nathan said, his voice a low, soothing baritone that didn't grate on Blake's heightened senses. "I told them you had an urgent off-site consultation." "I didn't tell you to do that," Blake managed to grit out, though the words felt like lead. "You didn't have to," Nathan replied calmly. Nathan moved to the windows. With a practiced motion, he pulled the heavy velvet drapes, plunging the room into a merciful, cool dimness. He moved through the shadows with the grace of someone who had memorized every inch of this space. Blake felt a cool hand hover near his shoulder, not touching, never touching without unspoken consent, before a glass of water and 2 small white pills were placed on the desk. "Take them, Blake. Before the nausea starts." Blake looked up. Even in the gloom, Nathan looked steady. His suit was perfectly tailored, his expression a mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes, warm and observant, held a depth of concern that Blake didn't deserve. "Why are you still here?" Blake wondered, his mind drifting through a fog of pain. "I've snapped at you. I've frozen you out. I've let my past spill into your lap like a crime scene. Why don't you run?" Blake took the pills, his hand trembling. As he set the glass down, his fingers brushed against Nathan's. For a split second, the cold, calculating CEO felt a jolt of pure, grounded warmth. It was the only thing in his life that felt real. "I have the lavender oil and the weighted compress," Nathan whispered, stepping closer into Blake's personal space, a zone that was usually a no-man's land. "Would you like to move to the sofa, or should I stay here?" "Stay," Blake rasped. The word was too fast, too desperate. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his armor. "I mean, the sofa is fine." As Blake transitioned to the leather couch, leaning his head back and closing his eyes, he felt Nathan's presence nearby. He heard the soft rustle of Nathan's sleeves as he prepared the compress. Nathan watched his boss, the man the world called the Ice King, and felt a familiar ache in his chest. He saw the faint scar near Blake's hairline from the accident. He saw the way Blake's breath hitched whenever the elevator dinged too loudly, fearing it was her. "You're so much more than what they did to you," Nathan thought, his heart heavy with a secret he dared not speak. "If only you could see yourself through my eyes, you'd know you aren't broken. You're just waiting to be held." Nathan leaned down, gently placing the cool, scented cloth over Blake's eyes. He stayed there for a moment, his hand lingering just inches from Blake's forehead. "I'm right here," Nathan said, a promise he had kept for 3 years. "I'm not going anywhere." In the silence of the darkened office, Blake Ashford finally let his shoulders drop. He wasn't the CEO of Ashford Industries. He was just a man, safe for one more hour, because Nathan Wyatt was standing guard. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Past. The fragile peace of the previous afternoon was a ghost by the following morning. The sun was too bright, the city too loud, and the air inside the Ashford building felt thin, as if the oxygen was being sucked out by an approaching storm. Blake stood by his desk, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket with fingers that felt like stiff clay. He had slept 4 hours, a victory by his standards, thanks to the lingering scent of the lavender Nathan had used. But the dread was back, curling in his stomach like a sleeping serpent. "Your schedule for the day, sir," Nathan said, entering the office with a tray of black coffee and a single green juice. He looked impeccable, though Blake noticed the slight shadow under Nathan's eyes. He had likely stayed up late finishing the reports Blake had been too incapacitated to touch. "Cancel the lunch with the investors," Blake said, his voice clipped. "I can't do crowds today." Nathan paused, his thumb tracing the edge of the tablet. "I already moved it to a private dining room at the Pierre. Only 3 attendees. High-backed booths. Very quiet." Blake looked at him, a flicker of genuine surprise breaking through his icy facade. "You're getting too good at anticipating my retreats, Nathan." "It's my job to ensure the CEO is in the best environment to lead," Nathan replied smoothly, though his pulse quickened at the direct eye contact. They headed down to the private garage, the elevator ride a silent ritual of shared space. But the moment the doors slid open to the subterranean level, the air changed. Sitting on the hood of Blake's silver Maybach was a bright, primary red gift box. It looked garish and violent against the sleek metallic paint. Blake froze. His breath hitched, a sharp, ragged sound in the quiet garage. He didn't need to see a card. The red ribbon was tied in a specific, intricate knot, the same way Samantha used to tie his silk ties before she would tighten them just a little too much, watching his face turn red with a terrifying, playful grin. "Sir, stay back," Nathan commanded. The assistant persona dropped, replaced by something protective and fierce. Nathan approached the car carefully. He pulled a pair of tech gloves from his pocket. He had started carrying them 6 months ago, after the first time Samantha had sent a gift laced with powdered glass. He lifted the lid. Inside was a single, shattered porcelain doll. It had been dressed in a miniature version of the suit Blake had worn the night of his fall. One of the doll's legs was snapped off, and its head was smeared with a dark, sticky red substance that smelled sickly sweet, cherry syrup mixed with something metallic. Pinned to the doll's chest was a note: "I miss how you looked at the bottom of the stairs. So fragile. So mine. See you soon, B." Blake let out a choked sound, his knees buckling. He caught himself against a concrete pillar, the rough stone scraping his palm, but he didn't feel it. His mind was back in that dark house, feeling the shove, the terrifying sensation of his feet leaving the floor, and the agonizing heat of the overdose she had forced upon him to help him sleep while he lay broken at the landing. "Blake. Look at me." Nathan was there, his hands firm on Blake's shoulders. He was breaking the unspoken rule of no touching, but it didn't matter. Blake was drowning. "She's here," Blake whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused. "Nathan, she's in the building. She was here. She isn't here now." "I have security pulling the tapes already," Nathan said, his voice a steady anchor in the middle of Blake's hurricane. "Look at me. Breathe. Count the buttons on my vest. 1. 2. Blake's eyes locked onto the polished buttons of Nathan's waistcoat. 1. 2. 3. He focused on the steady rise and fall of Nathan's chest. The smell of Nathan's soap, sandalwood and starch, began to drown out the metallic scent of the syrup. "He's still here," Blake thought, his fingers clutching Nathan's forearms. "He's seen the worst of it. He's seen the doll. He knows I'm a hunted man, a victim, a coward, and he hasn't let go. I'll get rid of it," Nathan promised, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl intended for the woman who wasn't there. "I'll handle it. You're going back upstairs. You aren't going to the lounge. We're locking the floor." I can't be alone, Nathan," Blake admitted, the confession tasting like ash. Nathan's expression softened, the professional mask crumbling just enough for Blake to see the raw devotion underneath. "You haven't been alone for 3 years, Blake. Why would today be any different?" As Nathan led a trembling Blake back toward the elevator, he glanced back at the red box. His jaw set in a hard line. He loved this man, this brilliant, shattered man, and he realized in that moment that being an assistant wasn't enough anymore. He wanted to be the shield that Samantha Bale broke herself against. Chapter 3: The Gala of Glass. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of shimmering silk, clinking crystal, and the kind of artificial laughter that only exists in the presence of extreme wealth. For Blake Ashford, it was a minefield. Every flash of a photographer's bulb felt like a physical blow against his eyes. He stood near the champagne fountain, his hand curled around a glass of sparkling water. He wore his CEO face, a mask of cold, sharp angles and eyes that looked like frozen lakes. Only Nathan, standing exactly 2 paces behind and 1 to the left, noticed the way Blake's thumb was rhythmically rubbing against his index finger, a nervous tic he only displayed when he was on the verge of a sensory overload. 10 more minutes of socializing, sir," Nathan whispered, leaning in just enough for his breath to warm Blake's ear. "Then we can retreat to the VIP lounge for the keynote." "Make it 5, Blake muttered, his jaw tight. "The air in here is too thick." Nathan nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. He wasn't looking for investors, he was looking for a specific shade of red hair, a specific predatory gait. He had doubled the security detail at the door, but Samantha Bale was a ghost who knew how to walk through walls. "Blakey." The voice was like a razor blade dragged across silk. Blake's entire body went rigid. Standing by a fluted marble pillar was Samantha. She was radiant in a dress the color of fresh arterial blood, her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her wide, manic eyes. "Samantha," Blake said, his voice a hollowed-out version of itself. "You aren't on the guest list. I'm an Ashford at heart, darling." "Lists don't apply to me," she purred, stepping into his personal space. Nathan moved to intercept, but she held up a gloved hand. "Oh, be quiet, little secretary. I'm talking to my soulmate." She leaned in, her perfume, a heavy, cloying lily scent, choking Blake. She reached out and straightened his lapel, her fingers lingering near his throat. "You look so handsome in black," she whispered, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly intimate level. "It reminds me of that night on the stairs. The way you looked when your eyes rolled back. Do you remember what you said right before the pills took hold? You begged me not to leave you. You said I was the only one who truly knew you." It was a lie, a twisted reconstruction of a night of horror, but the trauma didn't care about facts. The room began to tilt. The gold-leafed ceiling seemed to press down on Blake's chest. The sound of the orchestra warped into a high-pitched ringing. "I can't breathe," Blake thought, his vision tunneling until all he could see were Samantha's red lips moving, mocking his pain. "Sir." Nathan's voice cut through the fog, sharp and commanding. Nathan didn't ask permission this time. He stepped between them, his large frame completely obscuring Samantha from Blake's view. He placed a firm, grounding hand on the small of Blake's back. "Ms. Bale, you are trespassing." "Security is already behind you," Nathan said, his voice cold enough to drop the room's temperature. "You think you can protect him from me?" Samantha hissed, her face contorting into something monstrous. "He's broken. I'm the only one who likes the pieces." "He isn't broken," Nathan snapped, his eyes flashing with a rare, protective rage. "He's healing. And you're finished." As security swarmed Samantha, Nathan didn't wait to watch the spectacle. He threw a protective arm around Blake's shoulders and steered him through a service door into a darkened, private balcony overlooking the city. The cold night air hit Blake, but it wasn't enough. He collapsed against the stone railing, his breath coming in jagged, terrifying gasps. A full-blown panic attack was clawing its way out of his throat. "Blake, look at me. Focus on my voice," Nathan pleaded. He dropped his professional guard entirely, grabbing both of Blake's hands and pressing them against his own chest. "Feel that? That's my heart. It's steady. Follow it." Blake's head fell onto Nathan's shoulder. He was sobbing now, silent, racking tremors that shook his thin frame. She won't stop. "I have you," Nathan whispered, pulling Blake into a tight embrace, shielding him from the world. "I've got you. She can't reach you through me. I promise, Blake. I promise." For a long time, they stayed like that. In the shadows of the balcony, the CEO and the assistant disappeared. There was only a man who was falling apart and the man who had been holding him together for 3 years. As Blake's breathing finally slowed, he didn't pull away. He realized, with a clarity that frightened him, that the only place in the world where he felt safe wasn't behind an office desk or a security system. It was here. In Nathan's arms. Chapter 4, The Blurred Line. The aftermath of the gala felt like a long, muffled silence. The Ashford office was usually a hive of digital pings and urgent memos, but today, the air was heavy with the unspoken. Blake sat on the leather sofa in his office, his jacket discarded, the sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled up to reveal his thin wrists. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had narrowly escaped a shipwreck. He watched Nathan across the room, quietly organizing the fallout from the night before, legal filings, security upgrades, and a dozen no-comment emails to the press. Nathan's movements were precise, but there was a new tension in the set of his shoulders. "Nathan," Blake called out. His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual authority. Nathan paused, turning with a tablet tucked under his arm. "Yes, sir. Would you like the shutters closed? Or perhaps some tea?" "Stop," Blake said softly. He gestured to the armchair opposite the sofa. "Sit. Please." Nathan hesitated. Sitting was a breach of the unspoken code. In 3 years, he had only sat in this room to take notes or sign documents. But the look in Blake's eyes, a mix of exhaustion and raw curiosity, left no room for refusal. Nathan sat, his back ramrod straight. "Why?" Blake asked, his eyes searching Nathan's face. The gala, what she said, most people would have resigned the moment they realized their boss was being hunted by a psychopath. Most people would have walked away the first time I threw a glass across the room because I couldn't handle the noise. "Why are you still here, Nathan?" Nathan looked down at his hands, his thumbs tracing the seam of his trousers. "Because I've memorized the way you take your coffee. Because I know you have a nightmare every Tuesday at 3 a.m. Because I can't breathe when I'm not in this building." "I'm well compensated, Blake," Nathan said, falling back on the safety of his mask. "And I take pride in my work. Managing Ashford Industries requires a certain level of resilience." Blake let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Don't lie to me. Not today. You didn't hold me on that balcony because of your salary. You didn't stay up until dawn last month making sure I didn't stop breathing during a panic attack because of pride in your work." Blake leaned forward, the distance between them shrinking. "You've seen me at my most pathetic. You've seen the bruises she left, the ones on my skin and the ones in my head. Why stay for a man who is so clearly broken?" Nathan's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The blurred line he had spent years maintaining was fraying. He looked up, and for the first time, he let Blake see the fire behind his spectacles. "Do you really think that's all you are?" Nathan's voice was low, vibrating with a sudden, suppressed emotion. You think you're just a collection of trauma? I stay because I see the man who donated millions to that orphanage last month without putting his name on the plaque. I stay because I see the way you look at the city when you think no one is watching, like you want to save every soul in it because you couldn't save yourself. Nathan took a breath, his voice trembling slightly. I stay because I don't know how to be anywhere else. Blake reached out, his hand hovering over Nathan's on the armrest. He didn't touch him, but the heat between their skin was electric. Is it just the job, Nathan? Blake whispered. The air in the room felt thick enough to drown in. Nathan wanted to scream it, to tell him that he loved him with a devotion that bordered on madness. But he looked at Blake's pale face and remembered the doll in the red box. Blake was already being stalked, he was already a victim. Nathan wouldn't add the burden of his own heart to Blake's shoulders. Not yet. I am your assistant, Blake, Nathan said, his voice cracking on the last word. That is my place. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I'll go check on the security team's progress regarding the restraining order. Nathan turned and walked out, his stride hurried. As the door clicked shut, Blake stayed on the sofa, his hand still hovering in the empty air where Nathan had been. He's lying, Blake thought, a strange, warm ache blooming in his chest for the first time in years. And for the first time, I think I want him to stop. But outside, in the hallway, Nathan leaned his head against the cold mahogany door, his eyes squeezed shut. He had almost said it. He had almost ruined everything. He didn't realize that by trying to keep the line straight, he had already crossed it. Chapter 5, Samantha's Escalation. The following week was characterized by a deceptive, suffocating calm. The air in the Ashford executive suite felt like the stillness before a glass house shatters. Blake was beginning to heal, or at least, he was beginning to try. He found himself watching Nathan through the glass partition of his office, not as a tool of his trade, but as a man. He noticed the way Nathan took his glasses off to rub the bridge of his nose when he was tired, and how he always straightened his tie before entering Blake's presence. I've been leaning on him like a crutch, Blake mused, his pen hovering over a merger agreement. But what happens when the crutch starts to feel like a hand to hold? The piece was a lie. Sir, I need to drop the physical copies of the Bale litigation files to the firm downtown, Nathan said, appearing at the door with his coat over his arm. The digital server is being wiped for security maintenance, and the lawyers won't wait. I'll be back in 45 minutes. Blake looked up, a sudden, irrational spike of anxiety blooming in his chest. Can't a courier take them? Nathan offered a small, reassuring smile, the kind he usually reserved for 2 a.m. panic attacks. In a case this sensitive? I'd rather ensure they reach the hand of the partner myself. Don't worry, Blake. I'm just going 3 blocks. I'll have my phone on. Be careful, Blake said. He wanted to say more. He wanted to say don't go. He wanted to say I realized last night that I don't know how to breathe in this office if you aren't in the room next to it. Instead, he just nodded. Nathan stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. He felt the weight of the files in his briefcase, evidence of Samantha's madness. He walked briskly, his eyes scanning the sidewalk. He wasn't a bodyguard, but 3 years with Blake had turned his ears into sonar for the sound of clicking heels or a car engine idling too long. He was half a block from the law firm when he saw it. A black SUV was parked illegally at the curb, its tinted windows like sightless eyes. As Nathan passed an alleyway shortcut, a flash of red hair caught the corner of his eye. Mr. Wyatt, a voice sang out. It wasn't the manic scream of the gala. It was a low, melodic hum that made the hair on Nathan's neck stand up. Nathan didn't stop. He accelerated his pace, his heart hammering. Don't engage. Get to the lobby. Get to the cameras. You're very handsome, you know, Samantha's voice followed him, closer now. But you're in the way. You're the static on our line, Nathan. Blake and I were fine until you started fixing him. Nathan reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over the emergency contact, Blake's direct line. Suddenly, the black SUV roared to life, tires screeching as it jumped the curb behind him. Nathan lunged toward the safety of the alley, but a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster, a hired hand, massive and silent. A heavy blow caught Nathan in the ribs, sending him sprawling. The briefcase skidded across the pavement, the files spilling out like white feathers. Nathan gasped, the air leaving his lungs in a painful rush. He tried to crawl, his fingers scraping the asphalt, but a designer heel stepped firmly onto his hand. Samantha leaned over him, her shadow blotting out the sun. She looked down at him with a terrifying, empty curiosity. He likes you, doesn't he? I see the way he looks at you when he thinks the world isn't watching. He thinks you're his anchor. She knelt, her face inches from his. The smell of lilies was overwhelming. Let's see how he feels when his anchor is broken. She didn't use a weapon. She used the heavy, metal-cased burner phone in her hand, swinging it with a sickening thud against Nathan's temple. Back in the office, Blake's phone vibrated on his desk. It wasn't a call. It was the GPS alert he had secretly set on Nathan's phone, the one that triggered if the device moved more than 20 feet from its projected path or detected a sudden impact. Blake stood up so fast his chair flipped over. He didn't call security. He didn't call the police. He ran. By the time Blake reached the alley, the SUV was gone. The only things left were scattered legal papers, a broken briefcase, and Nathan. Nathan lay curled on his side, blood dark and sluggish matting his hair. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. Nathan. Blake's voice broke, a raw, jagged sound that tore through the quiet alley. He fell to his knees, his expensive suit soaking up the grime of the pavement. He pulled Nathan's head into his lap, his hands shaking so violently he could barely feel for a pulse. No, no, no. Nathan, wake up. Please, wake up. Blake looked at the blood on his hands, the same hands that had been too afraid to touch Nathan just hours before. The coldness, the calculation, the CEO, it all burned away in a flash of white-hot agony. This is my fault, Blake thought, a tear carving a path through the dust on his face. She did this to get to me. And if he dies, she didn't just break a piece of me. She took the whole thing. In that moment, as the sirens began to wail in the distance, Blake Ashford finally stopped being a victim. He looked down at the man in his arms and felt a terrifying, crystalline clarity. He loved him. And God help anyone who tried to take him away. Chapter 6, The Awakening. The sterile smell of the hospital, bleach, latex, and ozone, usually sent Blake Ashford into a catatonic state of PTSD. But as he stood in the private waiting wing, his suit jacket discarded and his white shirt stained with Nathan's blood, he didn't feel the familiar pull of a panic attack. For the first time in years, the static in his brain had cleared, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. The Ice King had returned, but he wasn't freezing over to hide, he was freezing over to sharpen himself into a blade. "Sir," a voice whispered. It was Miller, the head of Ashford's private security firm. He looked shaken. He had never seen his boss look like this, eyes wide, pupils blown, yet standing with a terrifying, rigid stillness. "We have the footage." It was a black SUV with stolen plates. "But the man who hit Mr. Wyatt, we've identified him. He's a low-level enforcer she hired through a dark web forum." "I don't care about the enforcer," Blake said. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp that sounded nothing like the polished CEO. "Where is she?" "She's gone to ground, sir. We think a safe house in the hills." "Find it," Blake commanded. He turned to look through the glass partition of the ICU. Nathan lay there, a stark white bandage wrapped around his head, looking devastatingly small beneath the hospital sheets. The sight of the man who was usually his pillar of strength reduced to this vulnerability caused a roar of fury in Blake's chest. I spent years letting her haunt me, Blake thought, his hand pressing against the glass. I let her make me a prisoner in my own skin. I thought that by staying quiet, I was surviving. But she didn't just want me. She wanted to destroy the only beautiful thing I had left. Mr. Ashford, a nurse approached. The patient is stable, but he's still unconscious. You should go home, Anne. I am not leaving this floor until he opens his eyes, Blake said, not even turning his head. And if anyone who isn't on my approved list comes within 50 feet of this wing, your security team will be replaced by mine. Do I make myself clear? The nurse nodded quickly and retreated. Blake pulled a chair to Nathan's bedside. He reached out, his fingers trembling as he finally, voluntarily, took Nathan's hand. It was warm, but the skin was scraped. Blake brought Nathan's knuckles to his lips, closing his eyes. You told me you stayed because you saw a man worth saving, Blake whispered in the silence of his mind. Now watch me become the man who saves you. His phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Is he dead yet, B? Or do I need to send another gift? Blake didn't flinch. He didn't spiral. He stood up, tucked Nathan's hand gently under the blanket, and walked out into the hallway. Miller, Blake said, his eyes flashing with a dark, crystalline light. I'm not waiting for the police. We're moving. I want every asset we own on her location. And get my lawyers on the phone. I want her assets frozen, her name blacklisted, and a permanent commitment order drafted. Sir, you're going yourself? Miller asked, surprised. She thinks I'm the man she pushed down the stairs, Blake said, adjusting his cuffs. She's about to realize she pushed the wrong person. As he walked toward the elevator, Blake felt a strange, new sensation. The headaches were gone. The dizziness had vanished. In the crucible of Nathan's pain, Blake had finally found his own strength. He wasn't just a CEO anymore, he was a man in love, and he was going to end the nightmare once and for all. Chapter 7, Drawing the Line. The air in the mountain cabin was thick with the scent of pine and rotting wood. It was a place of isolation, the kind of sanctuary a mind like Samantha Bale's would choose, a place where screams were swallowed by the trees. When the front door was kicked open, it didn't splinter under the weight of a SWAT team. It swung wide to reveal a single silhouette framed by the silver moonlight. Blake Ashford stepped into the room. He didn't look like a victim. He didn't look like a man who had spent the last 2 years jumping at shadows. He looked like an executioner. Blakey. Samantha squealed, springing up from a tattered velvet armchair. She held a glass of dark wine in one hand and a jagged piece of the porcelain doll in the other. I knew you'd come. You always did have a flair for the dramatic when you were pining for me. Blake walked into the center of the room, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the floorboards. He didn't stop until he was 5 feet away. Behind him, Miller and the security team stood like stone statues at the perimeter, but Blake signaled them to stay back. This was not a business transaction. This was an exorcism. Where is he, Blake? Where's your little shadow? Samantha tilted her head, her red hair spilling over her shoulders like a stain. Is he cold yet? I hit him quite hard. I wanted to make sure he forgot your name. Blake's jaw tightened, a muscle leaping in his cheek. Every word she speaks is a poison, he thought. And I've been breathing it in for years. No more. Nathan is alive, Blake said, his voice terrifyingly calm, a low, freezing tide. And because he is alive, I am giving you exactly 60 seconds to listen to the new reality of your existence. Samantha laughed, a shrill, brittle sound. You can't threaten me. We're soulmates, Blake. I made you. I broke you so I could see what was inside. You made nothing, Blake snapped, his voice finally cracking like a whip. He took a step forward, looming over her. For the first time, Samantha's smile flickered. She saw it then, the absence of fear in his eyes. "You are a ghost, Samantha. A pathetic, lingering ghost of a man I used to be. You thought you were the only one who knew me? You don't know anything. You didn't know that the man you tried to kill today is the only reason I'm still standing." He reached into his pocket and tossed a thick folder onto the table. It was heavy with legal seals. "As of 10 minutes ago, your family's trust has been liquidated to pay for the damages you've caused Ashford Industries. Every cent you have is gone. The man you hired to hit Nathan? He's currently in custody, and he's talking. But more importantly..." Blake leaned down, his face inches from hers. The smell of her lily perfume, which used to paralyze him, now only disgusted him. "If you ever, and I mean ever, look in Nathan Wyatt's direction again, I won't call the police. I won't call the lawyers. I will spend every waking moment and every dollar of my remaining fortune to ensure you disappear so completely that the world will forget you ever breathed." You wouldn't," she whispered, her lip trembling. For the first time, the Vyandra saw the monster she had tried to create, and she realized he was much more dangerous than she was. "Try me," Blake whispered back. "I've spent 3 years being afraid of you. I have exactly 0 fear left. Get out. If you're still in this state by sunrise, Miller will hand the evidence to the district attorney, and you will spend the rest of your life in a cell." He turned his back on her, the ultimate sign of indifference. He didn't wait to see her crumble or hear her scream. He walked out of the cabin and into the cold night air, feeling the weight of the last 2 years fall off his shoulders with every step. "I'm coming, Nathan," he thought, his heart racing as he climbed into the car. "Hold on just a little longer. The nightmare is over." As the car sped back toward the city, Blake didn't look at the rearview mirror. He was looking forward, toward a hospital room where his entire world was waiting to wake up. Chapter 8, The Heart's Anchor. The dawn light filtered through the hospital blinds in thin, pale ribbons, casting a soft glow over the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. The sharp, mechanical beep 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 was no longer a source of anxiety for Blake, it was a lullaby, a constant reminder that Nathan was still here. Blake hadn't moved from the bedside chair in 10 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and his once immaculate shirt was a wrinkled mess. He looked nothing like the CEO of Ashford Industries, and he didn't care. He was simply a man waiting for his heart to start beating again. Nathan's fingers twitched against the white linen. Blake's breath hitched. He leaned forward, his hand hovering over Nathan's before he finally settled it gently over his knuckles. "Nathan? Can you hear me?" A low groan vibrated in Nathan's throat. His eyelids fluttered, struggling against the weight of the sedatives, until finally, they cracked open. His vision was blurry, the world a haze of white and sterile blue, but then he saw the silhouette beside him. "Blake?" Nathan's voice was a ghost of a sound, paper-thin and rasping. "I'm here. I'm right here," Blake whispered. He felt a hot, stinging moisture in his eyes, tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in years. Nathan's hand turned beneath Blake's, his palm seeking the warmth of his boss's skin. Memory began to flood back, the alley, the scent of lilies, the sudden, blinding pain. His eyes widened in a flash of panic. "Samantha, you have to get away, she's..." "Shoo, Nathan. Look at me." Blake stood, leaning over the bed so Nathan could see the absolute stillness in his eyes. "She's gone. Truly gone. She'll never lay a hand on you again. I've ended it. It's over." Nathan searched Blake's face, seeing a strength there he had never witnessed before, a clarity that was no longer born of fear, but of a fierce, protective love. The tension drained out of Nathan's body, his head sinking deeper into the pillow. "You stayed," Nathan breathed, a single tear escaping the corner of his eye and disappearing into the bandage. "I'm never leaving," Blake said. He sat on the edge of the bed, his voice trembling with the weight of the words he had suppressed for far too long. For 3 years, I told myself that depending on you was just part of the job. I told myself I was cold and broken and that you were just the only one efficient enough to handle the mess. Blake took a shaky breath, stroking Nathan's cheek with his thumb. But when I saw you on that pavement, I realized I wasn't just losing an assistant. I was losing my soul. I don't just need you, Nathan. I love you. I think I've loved you since the first night you stayed late just to make sure I didn't have to walk to my car alone. Nathan stared at him, his heart rate spiking on the monitor. Blake, you don't have to say that just because I'm hurt. I know my place. Your place is beside me, Blake countered, his voice firm. Not 2 steps behind. Not in the next room. Beside me. If you'll have me, a man who's still learning how not to be afraid, I want to be yours. The silence that followed was filled only by the soft hum of the hospital wing. Nathan's chest heaved as a sob broke through his composure. He didn't hide his face this time, he let the happy tears fall freely. I've wanted to tell you for so long, Nathan sobbed, his voice thick with relief. I thought it was wrong. I thought I was just another person trying to take something from you. But I love you, Blake. I love you so much it was killing me to stay quiet. Blake leaned down, pressing his forehead against Nathan's. For a long moment, they just breathed each other in, the scent of hospital soap and the lingering warmth of a shared future. 1 month later. The glass doors of Ashford Industries swung open, and the lobby went quiet. It wasn't the usual silence of fear that greeted the CEO, but one of profound curiosity. Blake Ashford walked through the marble hall, but he wasn't alone. He wasn't walking 2 paces ahead. His fingers were laced firmly with Nathan's, their hands visible to every employee, every camera, and the world at large. Nathan had a small, fading scar near his temple, but he walked with his head held high. Blake didn't look at the monitors or the stock tickers on the wall. He looked at Nathan. As they reached the elevator, Blake leaned in, his voice a private murmur for Nathan alone. Ready for the board meeting, Mr. Wyatt? Nathan smiled, a bright, genuine expression that reached his eyes. Always, Blake. But remember, I'm taking my lunch break with you today. No exceptions. As you wish, Blake replied, his eyes softening as the elevator doors closed on the world, leaving them in the safety of each other's presence. The fortress hadn't fallen, it had simply opened its doors to the only person who had ever truly held the key.